Kyle, are you ready to talk about The Last of Us Part 2?
I'm not.
So here's the thing. Kyle, you are taking a solemn vow not to tease, not to flirt, not to dance around. This is spoiler-free impressions. But Jeffem, what is your stance here?
I don't want any impressions. I haven't seen any reviews. I've stayed as clean as I can. I have a completely sterile, germ-free room that I'm going to play it in for the deepest dive. So I don't even want to know if Kyle likes it or whatever.
Okay, great. And just a reminder before you turn off the headset and stuff, the deepest dive is going to be airing next week. That's going to be covering everything in the game for approximately the first 6 hours or so up until Seattle Day 2. Kyle, do you think that's a clean line? People will know when they're at Seattle Day 2?
Big time, yeah.
Okay, great. So
very clear.
When you get to Seattle Day 2, stop, and then you can... If you support us on Patreon at any tier, you can leave a comment for us to read for the huge community-fueled game club. We're going to have the post looking for those comments on Monday, and then Wednesday, the actual big discussion will air. So please look forward to that, and help tell a friend. We'd appreciate it. This is going to be a really interesting discussion based on everything I've seen. But Jeffem, what are you going to do? You're just going to mute your computer?
I'm just going to turn down my volume, and I'm not going to look at Kyle's square too much because I'm afraid that his face might give me hints at something I don't want to know.
Okay, great. All right, good to know. Kyle, how much have you played?
I haven't beaten it, but I'm at, I would guess, about 75%. Like
really?
I probably have like 2 more sessions and I'm probably done.
Wow. Do you feel like you've been marathoning it? Is it tough to put down, or it seems fast?
Oh, it's all I want to play. I would probably be playing it more if it is a very, I mean, you know, I've had, it's hard to play that game because it takes like separating myself from my kid and like wanting to focus entirely on it. Like there are some, like Final Fantasy VII was a game that was like easier to just play whenever I wanted because it's like a PG-13 movie, but this is like a hard R. so it's like I'm staying up later playing it and stuff like that, but it's all I want to play right now. It's like everything else has been sidelined in a big bad way.
Okay, how is it?
So I really like it. To just set that table there. It's one of those things. It's funny because Jeffem doesn't want to hear any impressions of any kind.
Yeah.
And I totally relate to that because remember when Toy Story 4 came out, and it took me a while to see it, and I was like, I don't want to know anything. I don't want to know if you like it. I don't know if you didn't like it. So I totally sympathize with Jeffem there. And it's funny because Toy Story 4 plays in it again because even when they announced it, like I wasn't sure if I wanted a sequel to The Last of Us, right?
Yeah.
Like in the same way Toy Story 4 is like, I think that ended perfectly. I don't know if I really am compelled to revisit that world or anything like that.
Jeffem has no idea that you're talking about Toy Story 4 right now.
I know, I got to start doing stuff like this and like... But
I like that he's still watching even though he can't.
Yeah, exactly. But it took very little time for me to be like, oh yes, I absolutely want to be back in this world. It justifies its existence very quickly. It was one of those things where it's like, even before starting, I was like, oh, well, I love that first game. I don't really know if I want to go back into that. And it's like within an hour, I'm like, okay, this should exist, and I'm happy that it's here.
Yeah. Visually, I assume just impeccable.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. It's like there are, like, even watching the footage for it in that recent stream, like there were little tiny moments where you're like, oh, this is a PS4 game and we're a few years into the PS4 cycle, but like the thing that Naughty Dog does so well is just really small animation, and like that stuff just shines. Like and it also feels like it's much more claustrophobic than the first game in a good way.
Oh, weird.
Like the camera feels like it's closer in general, whether that's like in cutscenes or during gameplay, or like like Ellie can like climb under cars and stuff like that, and like the camera gets in really tight, and like it really, you get to see all the little things that she's doing and the face twitches that she's doing and other characters are doing and stuff like that. So like that's, Naughty Dog is so good at that, and it's totally here, like 100%.
Yeah.
How loud is your PS4?
So I'm playing on a Pro, and it hasn't been too bad, and the loading is actually like surprisingly quick. Like when you die, you're right back into the action. There's it's like a GTA style, like one big load right when you start that probably takes like 2 to 3 minutes, but like otherwise it's very quick. Like dying is not too punishing because you can get right back into the action.
That's nice.
It's nice.
Other big takeaways?
Let's see. The world building is really good, like in the sense that I feel like I understand that world much better. It's not like you get more history of what's happening or anything like that. I don't care about the virus. I don't want to know more details. It doesn't really give you more details. But just like seeing how people live their life, I feel like they take time to give that room to breathe and stuff like that. And you also like, the other thing I like about it is you get a sense that like, you went with Joel and Ellie on this incredible journey in the first game. And because of that, you sort of play the second game and you're like, she's something special. Like they went through something, and you kind of learn that like, they're not that special. Like if you are alive in that world, you are a survivor and you've had to go through some like awful stuff. And Joel and Ellie are not the only ones who have gone through awful stuff. And I liked that idea of just like, it's that opposite power fantasy of like, you think of like, well, I'm Ellie. Like I've done so much in my life. And then you just talk to someone, they're like, oh no, I've done just as much worse. Like this, my life is very similar to yours.
I like the idea of the game opening like Naughty Dog logo and then in Wyoming or whatever, and it slowly zooms in on Ellie and she goes, "Hi, I'm Ellie. I've done so much in my life." This is the first line. I
didn't want to spoil anything, but yes, that is how the opening of the game is.
Oh man,
she's writing in her
I'm Ellie monologue.
She's writing in her journal and talking out loud to herself. I'm so badass.
Yeah, Ellie, totally the person at this point who would keep a journal. But you mentioned sliding in her cards, but do you feel like the gameplay side of it iterates on that stuff? Because I recently went back through The Last of Us, and that was still the part that to me was like, this is functional and occasionally like satisfying when you get through an area without being seen. But for the most part, it just feels like I'm getting through this so I can see the next cutscene.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that a lot because I've definitely had those moments. Like when I think of it's kind of hard not to compare Last of Us and Uncharted when it comes to Naughty Dog games, and I definitely pretty handily like Last of Us's gameplay more. Like it's a much more satisfying process of picking people off and being sneaky, and if things go wrong, like getting away and getting back into stealth is much more fun. And there have been those moments where I'm like, I just want to get through. There's like 6 guys here. This is going to take forever, But I don't know if that's a fault of the game necessarily, as much as it's just the story is so good and the writing is so good and like the cutscenes are so well done that those become the highlights. Like those are the rewards for getting through the combat. So like, it's tough to say that it's like I don't think it's like bad. It's fantastic, but I have had those moments where I'm like, all right, let's get through this. Like to the point where I'm even like, can I just sprint past these guys just to get to the next cutscene? Usually you can't. So, but
it's like you haven't seen anything that kind of piques your interest, or is like, okay, this is new. I haven't seen this before, or like, do you feel like it improves on any of the gameplay stuff in the first?
It doesn't feel like a huge innovator in that way, okay. But it is like improvements across the board. You know what I mean? Like everything feels a little better. The RPG systems are really compelling, and like they are substantial when you upgrade yourself or your guns, which I like, and it makes like searching everything much more rewarding. But there's nothing that's been like, oh wow, this is so much better than the first game or anything like that. It's all been very like, oh yeah, this is better. They improved on this, which was already pretty good to begin with.
How often are you moving a trash bin into a wall so you can climb on that thing and then you can climb up to the next thing on top of that?
I've done that more than once.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
What about ladders?
I don't know if I've encountered any ladders or not.
What?
Yeah. One thing I wrote down, it's on that topic specifically. So there are a handful of puzzles, which you could call like the moving the trash bins around and stuff. And and maybe you can answer this question from Sorio. Were there a lot of like puzzles in the first game, or was it all just like move this to make a step here?
There weren't a ton of, I think most of the puzzles were like, what object in this room do I need to put next to a wall, basically, or like some sort of higher up area so I can plant it there and climb up, and like I need to grab this, I need to plant this ladder here and then grab it when I'm up there so I can move the ladder forward so I can basically leapfrog using this one ladder. Or like, how do I move Ellie around in the water using a pallet? Like that world, it runs off pallets basically in the first game, because that's those are a lifesaver.
Ellie knows how to swim now, so that's an improvement. But yeah, the handful of like puzzles in that regard of like, okay, I need to figure out how to get from down on the ground to up here are really well done, and I really like them, and they feel really integrated in the environment. I don't walk into an area and I'm like, okay, I probably got to get up there. Is there a trash can I got to move nearby? It usually involves like, I got to make sure this door opens in the right way or something like that, or using the rope to like swing in certain areas. I enjoy solving the puzzles because like so few of them feel like I've walked into a puzzle room. They really feel integrated in the environment very well, and they use them sparingly. There aren't a lot of them. Yeah. So like when they're there, it's usually a moment where you've just gone through something insane and you need a little breather. So to take a little time to figure out how to get this door open, like I think it's placed really well, and I think that is an improvement over the first game in a big way. I know you haven't finished it yet. Do you have a conclusion in your mind though, or just a statement about like, God, this is what? I mean, you could say this about a lot of Naughty Dog games, but like even if you have qualms with the story, which I'm sure people will, because it's a lot of people making bad decisions in a really a world that's just hard to exist in. Yeah. Like even with that like caveat, I guess you could say, like they run circles in terms of like performance capture and storytelling and writing around everybody, and it's just like it makes other games they're embarrassing everybody else. Like really, like it's so good. I mean, like I've teared up like multiple times, and I'm not even like at the conclusion of the game yet, you know, and it's just like like I can't imagine anyone starting this game and just not having like I can't not finish this game, you know. Right. Early too, like it really gets the ball rolling pretty early in the game, you know? That's going to be interesting. Dan Trachtenberg, who is the director of like 10 Cloverfield Lane, he was the director of the Uncharted movie before he was taken off. He should have seen that coming, by the way. It's just still rotating through a director every 4 months for the Uncharted movie. But he tweeted this, and I want to just run it by you, Kyle. He said, okay, I've played The Last of Us Part 2. It's a master's piece. Referring to, of course, Neil Druckmann, but also every department head, artist, craftsman, QA, etc. Masters working at the highest level one can work. The acting is some of the best I've seen across any medium. The incredible sound design makes the graphics look better. One of the most well-told stories in the history of storytelling. There's countless would you kindly moments. It's hideous and beautiful. I've never felt more alive while experiencing a story from any other medium than I had with The Last of Us Part 2. Now, it's a bit much, but to what degree is it a bit much? A lot of hyperbole in there, obviously, but like, I don't think he's crazy. You know, like I don't like the performances and some of the sequences are just like incredible. Like it's just like it blows my mind. Like, and I think it is a factor of like the actors doing amazing work, and then also the animators just like, you know, multiplying it by tenfold. And it's just like, it's tough to say too much about the story and why it's really interesting. Please don't. Yeah, but it's like there are things about it where I've had those moments. I'm like, you know, I don't know if comparing it to a lot of other media, if I've ever really felt this way about characters or choices that are being made or the way the story is being told. So I don't think that's an insane tweet by any means, you know? Like I think, and it's also that thing of like video games have that ability to like invest you in a story more because you have full control over the character, and like it's recognized here and used to a great degree. You know what I mean? And also like even things like playing with your perceptions of how a video game should work in the favor of story. Like there's stuff that happens in that regard too. So Surreal, Connor wrote in just for another community question here. He says, when The Last of Us Part 2 reviews went live, there was an almost immediate backlash from all sides. Has the conversation surrounding the game the past few days affected your feelings towards it at all? Do you have any thoughts on how other people are responding? Like, has the reaction and seeing the reviews out there changed your anticipation or anything else going into it for the deepest dive?
It's been kind of mixed, I think, for me in terms of my personal reaction to what I'm going to get into, because I'm pretty skeptical of Naughty Dog games usually, in that I kind of find them like I think the storytelling part of them is usually like fantastic, but you know I always feel like I have to suffer through gameplay. And playing through The Last of Us again, I kind of like the story a little bit less for spoilery reasons, but going into this, I saw people who were skeptical of the first game really giving this one a lot of praise. So that was like the first thing where I was like, okay, maybe this is maybe fixing some of the issues I had with The Last of Us, and maybe moving things forward and actually like reaching kind of like the next level of appreciation that people always tend to find in these games that I personally usually don't. But I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of hyperbolic tweets like that one, and just the regular backlash of I think people not giving it 10s, being immediately attacked by the internet,
right,
by people who have not played the game. So that's always fun to see. So it's been this weird mix of for me, it always feels like, we've gone through this multiple times for me personally of Uncharted gets a bunch of 10s and I'm kind of less enthused about it. Last of Us Part 2 or Last of Us Part 1 gets a bunch of 10s and I'm kind of less enthused by it. But there are specific notes here that I'm seeing from people who kind of share my taste in games that makes me think that this will be a step up in that regard.
Yeah. So I was laughing as you're speaking, just thinking about Jeffem. He's even a good listener when he's not listening. Look how intent he is, and nothing's going. Hey, Jeffem, come back to us.
Quick, real quick. Everything outside the field of the camera, that's just blood everywhere, right?
It's just a mess.
His kill room,
he's
right?
a big freak. Yeah. You're good to go, Jeffem. Come back. So again, join us for the deepest dive if you want to join this conversation and contribute in creating the best, most thorough discussion about The Last of Us Part 2 on the internet. That's the goal for the deepest dive, and that's going to be kicking off next week. We'll be looking for your feedback on the game's first 6 hours or so to Seattle Day 2 on patreon.com/MinnMax2ends. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The deepest dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.